Hello. Wow, such a wondrous glowing lighting. Welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and this is World Watch and the highlight videos, mashup videos. Over the last 6 weeks, I had made weekly videos where I discuss my thoughts watching every single playoff game, yes, including that one, of all 11 participating regions. Those have come and gone, and I'm still working on some other videos at this moment, highlighting each and every team to give a quick introduction. But in the meantime, as I'm still working on that, I thought, not quick, but simpler, I will just put in large videos of the highlights, and I'll be putting a multitude of them, one for all of the playoffs in order of how they appeared, and one for each region in order of how they appeared. If you look at the title, that's the video you're watching. So, without further ado, let's just get to the first one. Starting with, we start the first series of summer, the first best of 5 in LLA Latin America with Infinity versus All Knights. And as the first best of 5 series of the summer, this one could have been worse. It really could have been. There's some glimmers of interesting things happening. Infinity, for one, are very well aware of their win conditions and how to start setting up for certain neutral objectives. But it's fairly rushed, it's often disjointed, or left to the wayside in favor of, some plays that had zero setup at all. On the other hand, All Knights show some individual prowess amongst their players and some fantastic team fighting that helped save some of their games from being totally one-sided. But I find myself wondering how well All Knights would do if they had been more coordinated outside of their team fights. That and having just a little bit more initiative, they found themselves really waiting off and hoping for a mistake out of the side of Infinity. On the other hand, neither team really had anything stand out from their vision game. And Infinity, who won 3-0, never kept any gold lead or ballooned it throughout. In fact, regularly losing them fairly handedly. Now, the standouts of this particular series are from Infinity, Chowny and Solid Snake, who, at the center of it, were equal parts the reasons for their leads and how they lost them, as both of them would charge in and opt in for fights that frankly should not have been chosen. Infinity, as they stand currently during this, as what I saw from this best of 5 in the playoffs, don't look like world contenders, especially not for the LLA. But, that could change if they start to fix a lot of their overzealous fight approaches and properly stick to their draft choices. With that, we just have to look for the next series. Up next, yes. We are still in the LLA. We've got Estral versus Team Aze. And I think the series is a little bit of better quality, mostly from the team that won. Now, if you were to tell me that Estral are the ones that qualify for Worlds in the future, I would not be surprised. This team showed some excellent approach to neutrals, vision, and early game pressure, much more than how they played in the spring playoffs. I would hope that their Game 1 play translated to the other two afterwards, where we found them being a little bit more brash and overzealous with their play. But, given how their opponents came in, it didn't make much of a difference. Ace, however, for their part, slightly baffled me. A lot of their coordination that they showed us in spring have been completely lost. They showed some very poor vision play, made no strides to approach the win conditions they drafted, and often committed on some plays that were usually very high risk for very low reward. Looking at you specifically, Dimitri, who, despite his strides on trying to gain control of the momentum and was really the driving force of how their team's approach to the game really counted, really made some choices that I think are largely questionable. It's super unfortunate too because the bot duo of Ace were also major shining stars for this team, especially across the series. And the team recognized this as they regularly drafted for them. And, like, they just never played around them consistently. Game 3, they did try it, but it was some very lackluster approaches, which is really unfortunate. Now, standouts for this particular series are for Ace and Boogie, who really enabled much of how Estral won these different fights, how they approached the neutral setups, and the overall pressure that they were applying against Ace. It was really impressive, especially from Ace, who I hope they would give him more than just tanks, but he really makes a lot of work with how he uses the tanks for the teams. I'm hoping to see how Estral fare against a team that properly tracks Boogie in the early game and has a much stronger sense of priority on how to approach neutral objectives and visions, as there's literally nothing here that punished them in any way, shape, or form. And what we saw from Estral was great, but I'm not entirely sure this would make them world contenders. So let's see what's next with... We have, over here back in Latin America, Isurus Gaming versus Rainbow 7 in a nice 5-game series. The first 5-game series here for the summer playoffs. Although, mixed feelings about this particular series. Now, there is something to be said about some continuous improvement during a series. To me, it is a good sign for teams who want to go to Worlds to show some form of adaptation when approaching their best of fives, as how much time you have to adjust during the tournament is rather limited. Both teams here showed that concept, but not incredibly well. Rainbow 7 were the most proactive team during this entire series, but lost that kind of proactivity over time as Isurus got more and more proactive with time. They had like an inverse curve effect here. And both teams here showed moments of brilliance with their setups and vision, but they tend to revolve a lot of their plays around, and the pacing of their game around neutral objectives, as opposed to continuously accelerating the game. The vision was super inconsistent, and the approach of the neutrals were lackluster at best, despite some of their moments of brilliance. Now, that said, Isurus Gaming did show a stronger aptitude around playing for their win conditions and drafting something that had very clear goals, while Rainbow 7 drafted a lot of awkward compositions, leading to a lot of upwards battles, even in games where they were severely ahead or found really solid avenues to play around. Especially for Game 5, I cannot wrap my head around the fact that in Game 5, you would pick such narrow engage options, and also Seo, and to every marksman, every bot laner, stop picking Vayne. To me, that just tells me that you are saying you are so much better than your opponent, you will rock them against somebody that is, with a champion that is just garbage for the vast majority of, like, the playtime. And it showed because they had a hard time, even in this Game 5, to really get the ball rolling with it. Now, as it stands here, neither team here looked to match the same kind of energy that Estral showed on the previous series yesterday. But Isurus Gaming looked pretty prepped to show the same kind of continuous improvement they had in spring for this particular playoffs, and that's nice. Standout players for me are the duo on the bot side of Gavoto and Jelly, who played out of their minds to the margins at all possible moments. And a lot of the plays, the way that they were able to navigate them, increased a lot of the margins of success that many of these plays should have gone wrong, or a lot of the ways that they've been dove on should have gone wrong for them. I was very excited to watch Isurus Gaming in spring, and they continue to show the same kind of approach here, and I hope to see the improvement all the way to Worlds. So let's take a look at the next series. We have Team Ace versus Infinity from Latin America's LLA. Oh, I hope you have good heart medication because Dimitri is going to give me a heart attack. Infinity, during the series, looked like the more stable but shy team. Never properly establishing vision in any aggressive manner, but really there for some very defensive vision. Coordinated for the team fights and what the next move will be, but it seems like they never played to win the games, just more to not lose. Meanwhile, Ace would have the most aggressive vision play, wildest approaches to team fights, reckless abandon for how they approach their neutral objectives, all in the hopes to find the winning play. Very low percent success, but high value approach to the game. And honestly, very exciting to watch, but largely it leaves many to pick up where the mistakes lie. Dimitri and Lonely find huge openings only to jump way ahead, leaving the remaining trio to fend for themselves. And they managed to do it. Kudos to 5Kid and Straight, who had to do a lot of heavy lifting across all 4 games. Now, this isn't to say that Dimitri and Lonely are bad players or the decisions cost them the game, but looking towards Worlds, this kind of playstyle is either going to net you a lot of surprise wins or hefty losses from the giants of the legacy regions, which is something to really think about, especially given how often a lot of these fights and successes start with Dimitri dying, leaving Ace on a disadvantage, only for one of the other players to come up really big on the win because the other team was just not playing up to snuff. Things to think about regarding that. But from that, I don't think Ace is going to do very well if they do manage to Worlds. But this is still the lower bracket. They would have a lot to go, and I don't expect them to do very well near the tail end of it. With that, let's take a look at the next one. We hit the LLA with Estral Esports versus Isurus Gaming. And this had a lot of excitement to it and some concerns. Now, Estral managed to show a larger amount of team fight coordination, awareness of how to use neutral objectives, wave management, vision play, but it always seemed like Isurus were on the offensive and holding the tempo lead. Now, Estral used that very well to their advantage, and when they did have control of the tempo, they forced mistakes out of Isurus very cleanly. I very much appreciate that it wasn't just them waiting for mistakes. They did, once having full control, force the mistakes out and held tempo cleanly. Now, the lack of proactivity up until they get that control gets to a point where it concerns me, especially looking out to Worlds, where if in the early game you're not that kind of proactive, you're just going to get steamrolled on. Now, Isurus, on their hand, show a lot of their gutso and proactive mindset, and it really helped them, especially in Game 2, when they had full control of every aspect of the game from start to finish. But looking back at the lack of consistent vision, haphazard map movement, lack of overall team fight coordination, and how easily their early game falls apart from their laning phase differences from lane to lane, makes it hard for me to see this team win the LLA spot at Worlds, especially given how much this team excited me for spring. This is a little disappointing. Both teams have shown, some concern, but Estral over here, being the most consistent so far, shows me a lot of confidence if they were to be the reps of this region. I just want to see them be a little bit more proactive of the tempo of the game early in and less reactive and waiting for mistakes from their teams. Now, shout out to Kindless and Mire, who managed to work well with their limits to control the map, or control their map space during team fights in a way that kept the Estral ahead most of the time, even as Boogie was king of the show, really popping off. take a look at the next series. Into the LLA with, in Latin America, with Team Ace versus Rainbow 7. And it really didn't matter which way this could have gone. Now, you could have coin flipped just to predict who would win. And I would be okay with either result going through. Not because both teams are exceptional, but because both teams would constantly make mistakes in ways that would decide the game for them instead of their strategy or draft choices. By all accounts, both teams show some excellent neutral setup, vision control, and denial, strong draft senses, good understanding of how to approach their win conditions. But those aspects didn't matter so much as waiting for one side to make a mistake large enough at a time of the game that mattered where it would not be able to come back into the game. One team, they would keep making mistakes back and forth, and then one team would make a mistake large enough that no matter what they would do, it essentially cost them the game. Neither team really ballooned their leads in a significant way. Neither team played side lanes or sieges well either. And I'm left baffled because so much of the fundamentals are solid from either of the teams. And that is really frustrating to see these games decided by errors more than the actual merits of the players themselves. Either team moving on would not give me faith that either would claim the spot for LLA's representatives at Worlds. Shout out to 5Kid, who was the most consistent performer out of Team Ace, and Dimitri, who always seemed to be on the lookout to make a play and keep things going. It was really good to at least see individuals having moments to shine. Let's take a look at the next series. And we head off to the LLA just before the grand finals, the semifinals, the losers finals, however you want to put it. We've got Isurus Gaming versus Team Ace. I quite enjoyed this series, actually. Now, proactivity and coordination will give you the edge on virtually all circumstances, especially well against teams that work mostly to set up and react to plays from game to game. Ace show a lot of solid vision play and neutral setup, as well as punish some of the more outlandish plays that Isurus throw at them. But the lack of proactivity and the need for Isurus to make mistakes in order to hit their milestones makes it super clear as to why Isurus won it out at the end. More often than not, a team with sufficient coordination will also pull off the setup to make the play work, and while Isurus didn't have the vision control consistently, it was there, especially in the lead and in crucial moments. And vision denial was more than in abundance. I mentioned those first and foremost because in terms of team fighting, these teams are pretty matched blow for blow, but it's just that Isurus always got the first blow in, and because all other things came out even during the early game in terms of like setting up regular vision controls or like wave manipulation or laning in and of itself, it mostly made zero differences outside of who was the team that came out first and just made the first play. I think that Isurus' playstyle is one I prefer overall, especially for a team from the LLA who may go to Worlds depending on how the rematch goes. As passive play is regularly a recipe for disaster against stronger teams. I'm really looking forward to the rematch in the grand finals to see how it pans out between Estral and Isurus. Shout out to Grell and Seiya, who not only created the plays, but often saved them if the execution didn't quite pan out the way that it was supposed to. Let's take a look at the next series. It's the grand finals of the LLA. Latin America's representatives are chosen here, and we've got Isurus Gaming versus Estral Esports. And congratulations to Isurus on being the 8th team, *, to qualify for Worlds. And honestly, what a solid series that leaves me excited and slightly worried. On the one hand, Estral was the better team in regards to neutral setups, vision control, pacing, while Isurus was a better team fighting team, had better vision denial, and ballooned leads much better when they got even the slightest bit of a lead that they could. While the series went back and forth, and even most of the games went back and forth internally, neither team was particularly good at closing out their games. Nor were they good at really applying even side lane controls, things that would apply their late game win conditions. Both teams had some solid early and mid games, and once that was done, it looked like the game plan was just to find a better team fighting angle. And given the result, Isurus found them more often than not. Now, while I prefer the overall approach that Estral has regarding just the general sense of making sure your win conditions are met, Isurus still bring to the table a level of excitement that I got from them in the spring split when I was doing for the MSI, like the Road to MSI series. And they have such a solid energy to them when it comes to ballooning leads and playing on the fringes of these team fights. It is very fun to watch them go. And they do still have a good amount of like attempts at ballooning leads while behind, or like doing some proactive stuff. But for the most part, this team is centered around team fighting, and very fun team fighting at that. It may not be good enough to dent some of the world contenders that have already qualified or seem to be on the way to qualify, but this is a solid team to send out for LLA. Shout out to Gaboto and Jelly, who really exemplified the strong team fighting that Isurus is all about. Let's take a look at the next series. Damn, that was a journey. That's 94 playoffs, or depending on the region that you were watching, anywhere between 5 to 15 best of fives. If you want to watch from the other regions, or you really want to watch the supercut, on either side, I don't remember which side I'm going to put it on, you can just watch those there. I want to hear your thoughts also on like which one of these were your favorite, what teams you think you're going to be like rooting for, just anything and everything down below. I'll be again making some videos further down the line, or should have some videos produced further down the line with all of the magic that comes with it. So keep your eyes peeled. And with that, I'll see you all next time for when I do the introductions of all the different teams. Ciao. Thank you all for watching.